Joining us now here on the Rich Eisen Show a couple days before the NBA draft. So much going on, as we all know, in the association. My longtime SportsCenter and ESPN friend, now at The Athletic, senior NBA columnist David Aldridge, here on the Rich Eisen Show. How you doing, DA?
I am good, Rich. How are you?
I am doing well. Your material on the Bradley Beal trade and why it went down the way it did, and the potential after effects is the best I read anywhere. So I appreciate you joining here to explain to everyone why the trade went down the way it did and looked to be such a steal for the Suns. David.
Well, I think the Wizards painted themselves in a corner by giving Bradley the no trade clause last summer on top of the max contract. Why they did it, they thought it was a sign of their loyalty to him. I think the $250 million is a pretty good sign of their loyalty to him, but they decided to put that cherry on top, and it really kind of cost them. Came back to bite them because it really gave Brad, as it's supposed to do, final say on where he wanted to go, and so it just kind of limited the available trades that the Wizards would be able to make for him, because he could say, "Well, I'm not going to agree to that trade." It's the same in baseball when you give no trade clauses to players. In the NBA, I believe it's 8 years service and 4 years with the same team makes you eligible for it. But nobody else in the league had it because it gives the player a huge hammer. And so they could not really generate a whole lot of trade offers, in part because of that, but also in part because the contract's just pretty big and onerous and makes it very difficult to absorb. And there's just not many teams, especially with the new cap rules coming online, Rich, with the new collective bargaining agreement. There's very few teams that are going to be willing to hit that second tax line and undergo the really kind of massive financial penalties that are going to be assessed to teams that do that, in terms of not being able to use exceptions to sign players, not being able to trade draft picks to acquire players. I mean, the league really is going to make it hard for teams to kind of blow through the luxury tax thresholds. But the Suns, with their new ownership, are willing to at least get close to it or do it for a year or skirt it or not skirt it, but go through it. And they found a partner. But the Suns obviously didn't offer them very much because they don't have any draft inventory. And they didn't, they're not going to give you Durant or Booker, obviously. So the Wizards were just kind of desperate to get Beal's contract off their books, and they did.
And so who else was in on this to the point where this trade that is, from just, again, reading it and who went back to the Wizards and how good Beal is on the court is viewed as such a steal. But so how that this deal that the Wizards accepted was the best one? Who else was in on this?
I mean, Miami was the other team, and I'm not sure if I don't know this. I don't know if Beal said, "I don't want to go to Miami," which I think I would be surprised if he said that, or if Miami just said, "We're going to move on," because I think they certainly want to try and make a play for Damian Lillard, and that may be their priority now. But I'll put it this way: Bradley made it clear that he wanted to go to Phoenix, right? So the Heat trade would have been Kyle Lowry and Duncan Robinson and some first-round picks. And I think the Wizards, if you gave them truth serum, would tell you that they wanted to take that deal because of the first-round picks that were attached to it. But at the end of the day, if Brad wants to go to Phoenix, they had to make that deal because he would not have approved the deal to Miami as long as the Phoenix deal was still valuable. And I guess it still was, as Matt Ishbia was determined to kind of make another splash and improve his team.
Senior NBA columnist from The Athletic, David Aldridge, here on the Rich Eisen Show. And let's talk about the effect on the Suns So does this mean DeAndre Ayton might be on the move because the amount of money for 4 players is so insane? Or is Matt Ishbia just going to say, screw it? I hired Frank Vogel, and we're going to go with Ayton and Booker and Durant and Beal and try and knock off a Nuggets team that looked to be quite invincible in the playoffs.
I mean, I think that my guess is that Ayton they will explore moving Ayton simply because they need more bodies, right? I mean, they just need more players on their roster. So if you can turn DeAndre Ayton's $30 million into 3 $10 million players or 2 $15 million players, you probably would do that just so that you have more depth on your roster. So I'm guessing that's what they will probably explore. They certainly are going to have to, convince more than one veteran free agent to kind of take less money to play for the veteran minimum to have a chance to win a championship. Now that could happen. They could do that, and they've got some guys currently on their roster that they can re-sign. Like T.J. Warren. There's a few veteran guys on that team that they would like to bring back. So it's not like they won't be able to field a team, but yeah, I certainly think that Ayton. I would be surprised if Ayton was still on the roster just because he's the last piece they have in terms of talent and contract that they can maybe turn into 2 or 3 players.
Yeah, and as I mentioned at the top of my show, David, this trade is fascinating not only because it involves an all-star in Bradley Beal, it's just the ripple in the pond of the NBA on draft week has so many. It's a huge splash, to say the least.
Yeah.
And that's where I want to land with Chris Paul here, because now Paul is on the Wizards, and part of your coverage was talking about Washington wanting to hold on to Paul just to trade him. They're not going to cut him. Is that still your belief 48 hours later right now? David? Yeah,
I mean, I think so. I think that's their intent. Now, certainly, obviously Chris Paul wants to play for the Lakers or the Clippers. I don't know which one is more important to him. I think they both are viable for different reasons for him. He certainly doesn't want to play for the Wizards. I think that's obvious that at 38 he wants to be on a contender for the last couple of years of his career, and the Wizards are not going to be a contender for a while. But it's just a question of, are the Wizards obligated to release him so he can just go sign with the Lakers or the Clippers on a minimum deal? Certainly they want to sign him to a minimum deal and don't want to spend, bring his $30 million or it's $28 million guaranteed for next year onto their books. But the Wizards are under no obligation to do that for him. Everybody respects Chris Paul and knows what he's done for the game, but the Wizards, it's a business. They have to protect their interests. And the best thing for them to do is to trade him and get, either a young player or players, or more realistically, get some draft picks out of the deal, because all they got from Denver was a bunch of second-round picks. They didn't get any first-round picks. There's some pick swaps, but they're so far down the road, it's not going to matter, right? It's not going to matter, at least in the short term. So I think that they will hold out for a while, at least, to see if they can generate a trade with either the Lakers or the Clippers. And I think there's a chance they could try to get a third team involved that maybe has some draft capital that they wouldn't mind putting into the deal for a young veteran and expanding the deal. The Wizards do have a couple of young players that maybe teams would be interested in, like Corey Kispert and Denny Avdia. So I could see a third team maybe being interested in one of those teams, or maybe even the Lakers or Clippers being interested in one of those players. But at the end of the day, the Wizards, I think, goal is to try to get some draft capital out of trading Chris Paul, back out west.
Well, and that's down the road, or potentially maybe even later this week. Who knows? Or when the new league year begins. David Aldridge of The Athletic here on the Rich Eisen Show. But the most immediate, newsiest, juiciest item that Chris Paul threw out there in an interview with the New York Times on Monday, David, outside of the fact that he found out from his 14-year-old in a text that he'd been traded. Happy Father's Day to him. But him saying how the Suns wanted to go in a different direction, and he said Matt, meaning Ishbia, the owner, and Isaiah, meaning Thomas. Is Isaiah Thomas in the ear of the owner of the Suns and giving him ideas or influencing him in a way that Chris Paul doesn't mention James Jones, the general manager of the Suns, when he says about going in a different direction? David?
Well, it certainly was, it was certainly rumored during the playoffs because Isaiah was at several Suns games, I think, in Phoenix. And someone, I'm trying to remember, and I don't want to put anybody's name out there if I don't know exactly, but I know someone wrote that he was going to have some sort of official role with the team, and the team denied it and said that wasn't true. But it certainly appears that Isaiah Thomas has some sort of, kitchen cabinet type of role with Matt Ishbia in terms of advising him on potential trades and things. So that does not surprise me. But I think at the end of the day, this is Matt Ishbia really trying to drive this train. He's been very upfront about his intent and his aggressiveness. Moved quickly to fire Monty Williams and hire Frank Vogel to be the coach. And the first thing out of the first move he made seconds after acquiring the team was to trade half the team and all of their draft picks for Kevin Durant. So he's been intentional about what he wants to do with that team, and this certainly falls in line with that. Getting Bradley Beal, for not very much, in all honesty, and that's not a criticism of Chris Paul or Landry Shamet, but for a three-time All-Star, I think most people thought you would get something more in terms of draft picks and draft capital. Matt Ishbia has been incredibly aggressive about it and has that team poised to challenge the Nuggets, I think, and the Lakers and Clippers and Warriors at the top of the Western Conference next year.
The Athletic senior NBA columnist David Aldridge, couple more minutes left with him right here on the Rich Eisen Show. The Tuesday before the NBA draft, is Damian Lillard in play over the next 48 hours, sir?
I think it's possible. I'll say that. I think it's possible. I know Miami is trying very hard to make that happen. At the end of the day, I think Dame's got to give the go, no go. It's going to be up to him to decide how hard he wants to push this. And it depends, I think, if the Blazers can turn that third pick into the type of all-star level player that Dame would want to play with in Portland. I think it's a tall order. I don't see Jaylen Brown on the horizon, for the Blazers or someone of that caliber. Now, as you get closer to the draft, people make their best offers, right? So I'm not saying it's not possible, but right now I don't see a scenario where the Blazers are going to get the type of player that I think Lillard wants to play with for that third pick. And then the Blazers also have to, Rich, they also have to consider that the chances of them having a pick this high and being able to take someone as good as either Brandon Miller or Scoot Henderson in the future is not very high. This is probably the best chance they're going to have in a very long time to take a real potential difference-making talent at the top of a draft. And, you do have to think about your future if you're the Blazers. So, it's a tough call for them. I mean, it's a tough call. I'm not sure which direction I would go in, but I think that they have to come out of this draft knowing that either Lillard's going to be there the rest of his career or they're going to move on from him. I don't think they want to go into another offseason with this kind of uncertainty.
And what about Zion Williamson? Is he in play over the next 48 hours, do you think?
I'm less certain that that's going to happen. I know that was, written about or rumored a few days ago, but I don't get the sense that that's something that the Pelicans are just dead set on doing. Certainly there's concern about Zion going forward, and there's certainly concern about his ability to stay healthy and to play games. But that particular trade that was rumored about the third pick, I don't think has legs at all. Does that mean they wouldn't be pushing for a deal, maybe after July 1st? I can't say that that's not possible, but I don't think that particular deal is in play right now. And
just, last one for you, David. This NBA draft week, it just seems it's so full of intrigue, even though we know who's number one overall. But the way that Victor Wembanyama has captured, the YouTube audience and the Twitterverse and what have you, just makes him fascinating. Right. And then, Greg Popovich's future and that conversation, along with who goes 2, who goes 3, what does that mean for Lillard? Is he in play? Yeah. Is Zion in play? The Ja Morant 25-game suspension. All of this news. Is this the, juiciest draft week you can recall, David? In recent memory here?
Yeah, I think it's certainly up there because of the, you start with the intrigue about Wembanyama, right? Even though we know he's going to San Antonio, everybody's kind of a buzz as to what does that mean for the Spurs? How are they going to handle it? What are they going to do? It creates this kind of own energy. And then you just have so many teams, I think it's 6 or 7 that have more than one first-round pick, right? So just knowing that teams are not normally interested in signing, 2 or 3 players to guaranteed money and with the first-round picks, so that a lot of those picks are going to be in play. There's going to be a lot of people moving up and down, and there's teams that don't have first-round picks that want to get into the first round. So there's going to be a lot of movement. You got the Lillard factor, certainly. I think that was another part of why the Wizards moved quickly, is that they just didn't want to be the person holding the bag with no dance partner, right, at the end of the day. So, these trades go fast, and then all of a sudden people are very different 48 hours later in terms of players, picks, whatever they traded for and whoever they traded. So, I think there's going to be a lot of activity between now and Thursday, and certainly on Thursday there's going to be a lot of activity.
Yeah, I even mentioned the Warriors, the Knicks trying to improve what's going on with the Celtics. There's just a heck of a lot going on while we watch Jokic at the racetrack, in Serbia. It's pretty amazing. Right. David, thanks for the time. As always, greatly appreciate you making me smarter. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rich.
At David Aldridge, DC on Twitter. I follow him. You should as well. The Athletic senior NBA columnist, David Aldridge, here on The Rich Eisen Show. Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.